So, as the Oklahoma Sooners are gearing up for a busy summer filled with events and top notch recruits visiting, they may have gotten a top notch visitor a little bit early. A top 10 player in the entire class of 2023, five-star defensive lineman David Hicks was reportedly visiting the Oklahoma Sooners per his Instagram story. And we need to talk about what this means, plus, whenever I saw it, the point I think it highlights and why this is a position group for Oklahoma that we need to watch really closely, that defensive line. Before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I need to hear from you. Hop down to the comments. Y for yes, N for no. Do you believe that the Oklahoma Sooners can be successful in prying Hicks away from A&M, where he currently has a crystal ball inserted per Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports? Let me know what you're thinking there. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that bell notification as I do constant college football content. You don't want to miss any of it, and if you enjoyed the content, like and comment down below. But having said all that, let's jump right into this, because this is going to be an intriguing position group in its entirety to watch for the Oklahoma Sooners, especially this summer as recruiting really starts to heat up. But why wait? If you can get in a visit from a David Hicks, a top 10 player regardless of position in all of high school football, you do so with a smile from ear to ear, because it's not every day that you're going to be able to get in a top 10 player, the number one defensive lineman in all of high school football, to come in for multiple visits. And if you're able to do that, you need to capitalize on every single one of them. And this is a position group for the Oklahoma Sooners that I can imagine there will be a lot of emphasis in for the class of 2023. Even though Oklahoma was quite successful at getting in defensive front guys out the transfer portal, we've talked about this at length, you still want to set up that healthy relationship in recruiting and being able to get those kids out of high school. And whenever you look at who the defensive line coach for the Oklahoma Sooners is, Todd Bates, there's no reason they shouldn't have success out of high school getting in these guys. And I think that's an indication when we see David Hicks taking a visit to the Oklahoma Sooners and posting about it on his Instagram. Because Oklahoma is going to be getting in a ton of top-notch defensive lineman visitors this summer, but if they can continue doubling up, it's only going to help them. Remember, recruiting is about relationships. We can talk about players going to an institution, but at the end of the day, it's relationships that sell these battles. It's relationships that ultimately matter the most, even more so than the institution. And if they can establish these relationships earlier, it's only going to pay off in the back end. But they are going to have stiff competition for David Hicks. As I said in the intro, Steve Wiltfong of 24/7 Sports has currently inserted a crystal ball in favor of Texas A&M. Texas A&M just took what may be the best defensive line haul I've seen in recruiting. If you can think of one that was better, please drop it down below. And I don't mean in terms of once they get to college through their 4 years what they produced. I mean in terms of high school players going to the collegiate game. I can't think of another defensive line class as stacked as what A&M took last year. Now, maybe that's something that helps out Oklahoma because there is more availability at the Oklahoma Sooners, but at the end of the day, we need to understand Elijah Robinson, Texas A&M's defensive line coach, is not only an elite recruiter, he's an elite coach, and if he's on the trail, you better sit up because it's going to be an absolute battle. Luckily for the Sooners, you have your own dude you can throw in Todd Bates. And I think the other thing we need to talk about is even though it's so great that Oklahoma is able to get in this visit for David Hicks, it's really showing the palpable excitement that the Sooners have around that program, specifically with these top-notch defensive players. It also points to something else I want to talk about, the need of this position for the Oklahoma Sooners, something we've kind of hinted at. But I would imagine this is going to be an area of emphasis for the Sooners 23 class. And if you have Todd Bates, if you have Miguel Chavez, who might be young, but remember, I already made a video on Miguel Chavez because he's already blown me away by the work he's done on the trail. It didn't take him a full year for me to take notice, so I think you have to feel very comfortable there. Those two guys have already identified multiple individuals. And whether we're talking about David Hicks, whether we're even talking a year in advance about David Stone, whether we're talking about LeBlanc, or whether we're talking about PJ Atabara, there are multiple different names that Oklahoma is courting to try and be successful in the defensive front. Everything in football starts with the trenches, with your offensive line and your defensive line. If your defensive line cannot give you the push you want, it's going to inevitably make everybody's job harder. One way to do that, excellent coaching, but with excellent talent. Todd Bates is no stranger to either one of those ideologies. Excellent recruiting is something he does very well, and he is a phenomenal developer. So it makes complete sense when we see these defensive linemen interested. It is going to be important to try and capitalize on these battles, though. And an individual such as PJ Atabara, an individual such as Derek LeBlanc, those would be huge wins for the Oklahoma Sooners. Wins that they're counting on getting. At the end of the day, you're very happy that you are getting these guys into campus. That is a great stepping stone in the right direction. Getting these 5 stars, blue chip 4-star prospects to take as much notice of the Oklahoma Sooners as they have is a great place to start. But now Oklahoma fans are ready for the back end of that. They're ready for these guys to make their commitments. And one thing I will say, let's be patient. We are still very early into our process for the class of 2023. We know this. It's going to be a long process, not only for Oklahoma, but for everybody. But with that in mind, Oklahoma's now looking at it knowing they have the coaching staff and knowing they have the recruiters to capitalize on these defensive prospects. And so being able to do so now becomes even more so important. And this is going to be something I can't wait to watch. I've said it a few times. In my opinion, the Oklahoma defensive line is going to be a major emphasis in recruiting for the class of 2023. And when you look at the recruiters they've introduced, and you know Brent Venables is going to have his hand in a lot of these battles, and why wouldn't he? You talk about relationships. Everything I've ever heard about Brent Venables, that's the word I always hear. Relationships. Even before we get to the X's and O's, and everybody has great things to say about him there. I mean, just flip on the film. Easy to see why. I always hear about relationships. And before I was super into college football and when I was just a very casual fan, I always used to think, oh, well, relationships are great, but give me the guy that knows X's and O's. And as I continue, you're looking for those unicorns. You're looking for the guys that you have complete and utter faith in their X's and O's ability, but you know they are going to foster positive relationships, because with positive relationships comes positive culture. With positive culture comes results. And so at the end of all of this, I can't wait to see what Oklahoma does on their defensive line recruiting. You have got great coaches there now and a head coach that's a defensive-minded guy. You're finding yourselves in multiple battles for these blue-chip prospects, but now it's about capitalizing on those battles. But at the end of the day, being able to generate the palpable excitement that Oklahoma has is a great place to start. Now it's just intriguing to see where they take it. Can't wait to hear from all of you. Hop down in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking about this. Let me know the visits you're most intrigued about. Let me know the players you're most interested in, and we can talk about them in a later video. That's it. See ya.